Hello everyone, welcome. In this section we are going to cover few topics that are part of the AZ 301 or 303, 304. This is the new exam number. Previously it used to be 300 and 301. Azure exam topic for the expert Azure architect certification. So we're going to cover several topics. It will be a little bit long video, and these are the main topics that you need to be familiar with if you're preparing for the AZ 303, 304 exam now. The topic that we're going to cover is called the implementing and managing virtual machines, and we'll create the virtual machines, Windows and Linux. We'll configure virtual machines for high availability, and we're also going to use availability sets. You're going to learn how to automate the virtual machine deployment using virtual machine scale sets. Okay, the scale sets, they really use the availability sets behind the scene, and you will learn how to do that. We'll take a look into how to deploy this type of machines using ARM templates, and there's another exam topic that we're going to configure. We're going to talk about is configuring the Azure disk encryption. So pay attention. I try to make this video as comprehensive, so you can just come to this video and gain the knowledge that you need for the exam. Alright, so let's start here. Virtual machine, many options and predefined images available for the virtual machines. If you want to deploy something, you can do this using either Azure Portal, PowerShell, CLI, ARM templates. Many ways to do it. We'll primarily use the Azure Portal for this purpose today. And VM size, this is, there are hundreds of VM sizes, if not 100, but many. So let's try to go to this link if I can, and we'll take a quick look at all the different type of VM sizes. It didn't copy properly. We'll just say VM sizes available for Azure. Okay, it should give me this link, so you just go to that link. So kind of try to read this and be familiar what you might be looking at for the exam. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different categories. So if you start, you have the general purpose machines. Mostly you'll be using them for your testing, your test deployment, when you're playing with, like, preparing for the exam, that kind of stuff. These are balanced CPU to memory ratio, ideal for testing and development, small to medium databases, and low to medium traffic web servers. And if you kind of look at it, what I noticed, the B series, which is with the burst, and most of D series and the A series, AV2, they are general purpose. So if I see D attached to anything, so I'm just thinking like it's a development, so it's a general purpose. Okay, although some Ds are not part of it, but if you see, most Ds are here. Okay, so this is the only, see, here's another exception, DV2 and like DD something, DS, DV2. So there's some exceptions, but in general what I saw that most D series machines, they're general purpose. F series machines, they're compute optimized. Okay, E series machines, they're memory optimized. I'm talking about in general sense. L series for storage optimized. If you have N series, NC, NC2, they're GPU optimized, specialized virtual machine targeted for heavy graphic rendering. And if you have high performance compute, they're H series machines. So I guess there is no confusion between the high performance, they're all H, GPU all N, storage all L. Memory, you can have mostly E, then some M, and here is a little bit of D they have put it in. So so you just have to kind of remember, okay, most of them are memory optimized, but there could be some D series. Compute optimized, they're all F, and again general purpose all B and A series virtual machines. So kind of, it's probably not possible for everyone to memorize the whole thing, but in general, that's what it is. So before you go and take the exam, come back and kind of review. Okay, H means high performance, N means GPU optimal, L is storage, memory, E or M, compute, F, fast. That's how I try to remember. And general purpose is like development, so most D's. Okay, so if you come up with a better memorization technique, please let me know. But this is how I try to remember generally what they are. Alright, so another thing is when you deploy the virtual machines, you have an option to do it either a managed or a unmanaged disk. And there is a difference. Azure or Microsoft recommends that you should always go with the managed disk for virtual machine deployment. It takes care of a lot of administrative work for you, and it will give you a lot better SLA, and you don't have to worry about managing and moving the disk. And if you use the managed disk, you can use up to 100,000 or 10,000 VM disks inside a subscription. So that is wonderful. Previously, there were some restrictions like how many disks you can have within one storage account, and based on that, there were some mess that you had to deal with. And that's what I heard. Alright, so let's do our first lab. Let's deploy two virtual machines, one with the managed disk and another with the unmanaged disk, and see how that works. So let's go to our Azure environment, and what I'll do a virtual machine. And for last couple of days, East US was having a trouble with the deployment, so I'm going to deploy to some other region today. Not East US is not my best favorite region for the next 2 days, or for the last 2 days. So create new. So I'll just say VM test. Okay, and a virtual machine name, say I'm going to call it Win1. Okay, and then let's just use maybe something I haven't used recently, Norway East. Okay, I've never deployed anything like that in here. I'm gonna use one of the default ones, so let's say 2019 data center Gen 1, and let's select a size that is available, so and not too costly. So RAM, the cheapest one, I have 3.5 gigs of RAM, so that should be good for me. So but this is something you gotta careful. My subscription doesn't support deployment in Norway East, so I cannot use that region. So let's maybe stick to West US. Maybe let's try the West US too. Alright, that region is supported, so we got that one. Administrative account is just admin is you cannot use, so I'm just gonna use student. A password, confirm my password, and I'm gonna allow this port to be open, and go to the next one. I'm gonna use the default here. I'm not gonna change my disk type. Okay, and I'm gonna use my encryption. It's gonna be managed by Azure, so I'm not doing anything. Okay, if you want, you can change your disk type to standard HDD or standard SSD, but if you do, you will see that your SLA will have an impact. Okay, only premium disks qualify for 99% connectivity SLA. Okay, so I'm not doing anything, so stick to that one, and go to networking. I'm just going to use all the basic ones. Go to management. Here, diagnostics account, if it's creating a new one, it's fine. I don't need any of that. If you want to enable the backup and auto shutdown, you can do that. Backup, you can use an existing backup account if you want. Let's go to advanced. There's nothing crazy in there. Tags, I don't need anything, so let's go back in here and review it one more time. Port instance, size, username, port, everything looks good over here. Alright, so that looks good again. One more time, look at my disk. So if you had to manage, you would come to this advanced area and select use managed disk. I do not want to use a managed disk. For some reason it was selected use managed disk. I'm gonna say no. If I want to manage myself, but this one we are not selecting. We are letting Azure to manage it. So I'm gonna say yes. So Azure is managing the disk for me. The next VM we are gonna deploy, we're gonna use the other option and deploy it. Okay. So now let's, at this time you can do review and create. Okay. And it's gonna that's the cost is gonna be for this deployment, and you just start the deployment, and it's it says submitting deployment in progress, and you can watch the deployment in here. But we're not going to wait for the deployment to complete. What we'll do, as this is going on, we are going to go to the same resource group. Okay, and this is what is deploying, and which is good. We will go back, stay in this resource group. This is the resource group that we're win1. So we're gonna deploy a win2. Okay, deploy, just go compute virtual machines, and we're gonna do win2. Okay, and same region is fine, so it's West US2, and we're gonna use same 2019 server. Size is fine, so I'm gonna use the same username and password. Alright, we got that. This size looks like not good enough, so let's see. Let's get that one. Why it's saying in RAID, I'm not sure. Alright, let's come back to this one. Now in this one, what we said, in this case we want to use a managed disk. Okay, so now use managed disk, no. And if you look at it, Azure rules said for best performance, reliability, scalability, and access control, we recommend Azure managed disk for most virtual machines. Okay, but we are going to use the different one. Let's see. So it's gonna be placed in a storage account, VM test disk 756. Okay, and this time everything else I'm not changing. I'm just gonna say go to networking. I'm using the default option. Management, I'm gonna use the default options. Advanced, nothing to add. Tags, nothing to add. Review, create, and let's see, validation successful. So here is the only difference. Use manage this, no. Okay, so now create this virtual machine. Okay, and if you look at the notification bar, okay, the other deployment was successful. So while this is going on, let's go to the resource group. Okay, resource group virtual machine test, and in this resource group you see the win VM. This resource is now available to us. Okay, we can RDP to this machine if we like. It's got one vCPUs, 3.5 gigs of memory. It's running fine. you can look at multiple different things here, and we'll cover some of this in later lab. Let's look at networking. You have port 3389 open. Disk, this is the disk that got created. It's got the standard encryption, which is a SSE with PMK, and it's got the storage service encryption. It's got the read write type host caching in here. Okay, we have not created any data disk and disk setting. So while the other deployment is going on, so disk you can add it now or you can add it later. So just add one disk, create a disk. We'll take this to disk name win1 disk, and let's source type. I'm gonna select anything in here, change size, and I just need a very small, maybe 4 gigs space. Create. Okay, so that's how you can add a disk anytime if you like to your machine. So this machine where I'm adding the disk right now, we created this machine with the Azure Managed Disk option, and now so this disk is managed by Azure. If you now see, we added a LUN disk or data disk. We are using premium SSD, but look at that here, encryption is not enabled. My host caching is read only. That's how we created. And the previous one, our host caching was read write. Okay. Now you gotta save. If you don't save this disk will not be attached to your virtual machine. So remember to save this before you go. And if you look at the managed disk created since June 10, 2017 are encrypted with at rest with storage service encryption. You may also want to enable Azure disk encryption. So this is something we will go and work on it. Okay, so let's go back to our overview, then go back to the resource group, and let's look at our storage account. So the first storage account, that one got created as part of the win1. Okay, here if we go to containers, you only see boot diagnostics. Okay, let's go back to the overview page again, go to this. So both deployments are now done while we talk. So that was the first deployment, that was the last deployment, and here successfully updated virtual machine disk. That's why we added the disk. And this one is associated with the next, the VM2. So if I go to this storage account and go to the containers, and this is the difference. Okay, here you will see you have a VHD folder that's got created, and inside this folder you have the win VHD file, and it's a page blob, because page blob is the only type of blob that supports a VHD file. Okay, but if you look at the other storage, you don't see this file at all. So let's look at the VM2. So let's come back over here, and win2, this is the machine. So let's go to the disk as well. So here you see, since we have created the machine and we said no, Azure do not manage it, there's no encryption enabled at all, not even the SSE, right? I still don't have any data disk here, but the disk that we created to work with this particular machine, encryption is not enabled. So before we do anything, let's add another disk, attach unmanaged disk. Okay, and this experience is just a little bit different. new premium SSD, say 4 gigs again, and it's asking for a storage container. So let's see if I have a storage container. So 576, that's good. I don't have a container, so let's create a container. So test container, so let's create that one and select it. Okay, so storage blob, everything else is good. Everything else I'm gonna just say yes and say save. Alright, so what I wanted to stress here, I don't know if you're following my lecture closely. So we created two virtual machines, one with managed disk, one with unmanaged. With the managed one, Azure is going to maintain everything. So although the disk is also stored behind the scene in a storage account, you don't see that. In this machine where you are managing the disk, they will be shown under the storage account that you have used. Another difference is encryption. The encryption is not enabled for the disk if you're using non-managed. So if you are managing your disk, your encryption is not enabled. Okay, so you can click disk, OS and data disk. So let's just stick to the OS disk. And you can encrypt from here, but it's asking you for a key fault and key encryption. We're gonna do that later part of this video, so I'm not gonna just encrypt it just yet. So we'll come back to this one in a little bit. So let's go back to our lecture. So let me think about and maybe add one more slide in here just to summary. Okay, so summary for managed versus unmanaged. Okay, so managed is what is recommended by Microsoft. Okay, unmanaged is where you manage everything. Managed, you also get what do you get? You get automatic SSE enabled. Okay, and for this one you won't have anything. For this one not enabled by default. Okay, all right, so and you have direct access, so you can see disk file inside the storage account used during the deployment. Okay, here disk file not visible inside the storage. Okay, so that's something I wanted to stress, that these are the differences that you definitely want to be aware of. So let's go to the next one. So the next thing we want to talk about is like availability set and why it's important. Now your virtual machines that you just deployed, there could be multiple different things could happen that will impact the availability of those machines. One is unplanned hardware maintenance. Okay, if this is something that Azure really have to perform some hardware maintenance that is not planned, there's a live migration technology that's available within Azure that can identify there is a failure that may be going to happen very quick, and it will automatically move a virtual machine network connection, memory and storage to a different physical machine without disconnecting the client. Okay, so you will probably see like a very small amount of time, maybe for 30 seconds, the VM may not be available, but it's almost transparent. It will fix your problem. Now, planned hardware maintenance could also affect your machine, but most of the time, that is planned, so you'll be getting notifications and stuff like that. But for some of those, your reboot is required. So until you have like another machine that is running, and you have multiple instances available, when one is going through the reboot process, you can't keep the other one alive. If you don't have that, if you have only one machine, then you are in trouble. Like, it will be impacted for the time when the reboot is happening. And the third one is unexpected downtime. Again, if you have only one instance and if you have your virtual machine deployed in one data center, and if it fails, you may have an impact. The last is availability set. Okay, so if you should be using availability set if you can. What it does is provides redundancy, but it needs 2 or more virtual machines to configure that. With availability set, you can achieve 99.95 HLA of uptime, but the availability set must be configured at the time of deployment. So the last 2 virtual machines that we deployed, if we want them to use within availability set, it's not going to work anymore. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, see what else. Another concept that you need to know here is the difference between the fault domain and the update domain. Now, the fault domains are really, you can think about as a rack. Okay, and in a data center, like you have 3 different racks, will be 3 different fault domains. So even if one rack is completely gone, you have other 2 racks where your machines will be available. Okay, and the update domain is your machines. If you have 3 machines, the 3 will be in 3 different racks, and then when you're applying updates, the updates will not be applied all of them at the same time. Okay, so if you put 3 virtual machines and say, okay, give me 3 different update domains, then those 3 different machines will get updates at 3 different times. So even if one would go through a reboot, the other 2 will be available. Okay, so if that's clear, let's now go ahead and try to deploy a virtual machine within an availability set. So let's go to our Azure. Okay, and let's start by creating maybe an availability set. Okay, this availability set, you can create it even before you deploy. Okay, or you can create it at the time of a virtual machine deployment. So let's create it from here. So let's do and create an availability set, and we're gonna put it in that same VM test region US2 availability set, and fault domain, you see by default it's 2, and if you move to the very right, it will only be 3. So that's the maximum you can get. So 2 is fine for me. And for update domains, by default it's 5, and it could be 20 at the max. So 5 is fine for me at the moment. Use managed disk. Yes, we want to be able to use a managed disk. Alright, so let's see where we are. Okay, so we got our fault domains, update domains. Managed disk is what we're going to use, and in this particular availability set, and you just now can create, and this is just going to give you the availability set for us. Okay, just to create. So here we didn't create any virtual machine or anything. We just created an availability set as an independent resource. Okay, so you can go to the resource, and this is where it is. And if you see, there's nothing is attached to this particular availability set. Okay, and also what you see, you do not have any option to add anything. That is telling you that availability set you cannot, like if you have an existing VM, you just cannot take and put it in there. You have to select this particular availability set when you are deploying your machine. Okay, and if you look at it, this availability set is running in West US 2 region, and things looks good. So the next thing that we want to do, we want to deploy a couple more machines, and here what we are going to do, we're going to go and show you how to use a ARM template, which is again another exam topic. So if you go to Win1, okay, so let's see, there has to be some place where you have the template. Let's see, template, let's see, export template. Okay, so that is the template that we have used for deploying this machine. So let's take a quick look at it. The easiest way is probably just click on the deploy thing once again, but you don't want to just deploy it, but you want to modify a few things before you deploy this machine. You just want to use it as a like your starting base. So here is your custom deployment. Okay, it's based on the deployment of the virtual machine one, Win1. So resource group, the resource group is in a location that is not supported, so it's one or more resources in the template. So let's look at it. So it's picking up a whole bunch of things, but it's not giving us what we need for to configure the availability set. So maybe for this one, we're just gonna stick to adding a new virtual machine. We're just gonna call it a Win3, and our goal would be to add, I'm still going to put it under Win test, VM test for resource group. Just call it Win3, and here under availability set, this time we're going to use availability set. Okay, and now it's going to ask, either you can choose availability set. I'm going to choose the one that we just created, or you can create a new one, as I said. And then it's asking what image to use. We're going to stick to the Windows 2019. Select size is fine. Again, admin username, I'm going to provide some. Okay, so we got this machine, go to disk, and in the last two deployments we didn't add any disk at the time of deployment. With this one, we are going to add it at this time of deployment. I'm just going to change the size. I don't need anything big. P1 small disk is good for me. And here by default, since it's Azure Managed Disk, it will going to use the encryption at rest with platform managed even for the data disk. Okay, just say yes. And then networking, I'm not gonna change anything. Management is all good. Advanced, all good. So just create and review this particular virtual machine. Okay, and it's the only difference in here in this particular one, we are using an availability set, and we are also creating a data disk that we have not done so far. And just say yes and create. Okay. So this virtual machine will be now part of that availability set. So once this is going on, okay, we will still go to our virtual machines and create yet another one, which we're gonna call the VM Win4, or let's call it resource group, still the same resource group, virtual machine name Win4. Again, availability options, we do need to go ahead and deploy something within an availability set. So this is all manual, right? What we are doing at the moment, we are saying here are the machine that you should be using inside this availability set. So we are, if we deploy 3 virtual machines, we can go ahead and select the same availability set 3 times at the time of deployment, right? So let's do that. As your spot instance username again. Okay, we got that. Everything else, again a disk, create another disk for this one as well. Win4, change size 4 gigs. Okay, okay. And networking, no need to change anything. Review create. So this is gonna be my second virtual machine that we have said, okay, put this inside an availability set as well. So if you want to avoid this manual management of your virtual machine, there is another option for you, that is the availability or the VM scale, and we're also going to take a look at that. VMSS, virtual machine scale set. When we deploy that resource, you will see that resource will automatically take care of the deployment of the virtual machines. So we are not manually managing these deployments and not manually putting them in a availability set. Okay. So while this is going on, so let's look at that resource group that we have. It's a whole bunch of things. Let's see if any deployment is done. It looks like the last deployment was successful. Last means the Win3 was successful. Win4 is going on. So now let's go back to our availability set real quick. So if you go there, and if the other VM is successful, so I would expect one VM should be part of it, which is running, as you see, and the other VM is now getting deployed to this particular inside this particular availability set. So now here you are pretty much responsible for configuring these two virtual machines, and you will be deploying your applications in both of them. Both of them will be running at the same time. You will decide when to, you will be responsible for your high availability. But this is how you're going to use your availability set for achieving high availability. Alright, so let's look at that. There's some services is going on in another region in East US. It does not really affect the West US to the region that we're using, so I believe that deployment will still be successful without any problem. And the other thing that you will see, that once this creation of this virtual machine is done, if you look at the fault and update domain, they will be in different fault and different update domains. Okay, so if one of the machine fails, here it's the deployment is successful. So let's refresh this one, and it should give us at this time our, let's go availability set. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to populate. It still says creating, although it says my deployment is now successful. Alright, so let's go to the resource and let's take a look at the WinVM as well. One thing we want to look at is go back to the disk. So this is again another benefit. If you deploy the disk at the time of deployment and you're using managed disk, both data disk and the OS disk, they are going to be encrypted by Azure using the SSE, and Azure will be managing for you. Host caching, when we created for the data disk, is not available. Okay, and now let's go back to the availability set one more time. Hopefully it's all good. No, it's still the availability set. It still says creating. So virtual machines, this one, sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. If you see this, just give it a minute, okay, and it will show up, and your machines will be part of the availability zone or availability set. I'm sorry. So let's go back to our presentation and kind of review what we have done. So we have done first Win1, okay, that was managed disk. we used no availability options. Okay, Win2 we used Unmanaged Disk. Okay, no availability options, if I can type properly. Win3 and Win4 we deploy managed disk with the availability set. Okay, so the thing that we noticed that if you deploy with the managed disk option, Azure will automatically encrypt using the storage service encryption. If you do the unmanaged, there is no encryption available, you have to do your own encryption. If you create the data disk, no matter whether it's managed or unmanaged, after the creation of the virtual machine, it will not be encrypted. You have to apply your own encryption. But if you create the disk at the time of deployment, like we did here, both OS disk and data disk, both of them will have the SSE type encryption available to us. Alright, so that's kind of the summary. So let's go back and look at the availability sheet one more time. And I would expect that I have information available, and there we go. So if you see, your fault domain is now 0 and update domain is 0, and it's placed, and the other machine, your fault domain is different. It's now placed the fault domain in 1, and it's placed in a different update domain 1. So think about, if you keep adding more virtual machines, they will start putting those machines in different fault and update domains. So if something happens to one of the fault or update domains, you will still have another machine which will be up and running. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation, see what else do we need to cover. Alright, the next one is the VM scale set, and as I said, here we are kind of managing all the virtual machine, and we are deciding how many we need. Virtual machine scale set, it allows us to automatically manage and deploy multiple virtual machines. Okay, it's usually used to build large scale infrastructure, and it, as I said, it uses the Azure availability set, what we have been doing behind the scene, and it uses the Azure auto scale feature by default. Okay, so let's deploy our VM scale set as well. So let's come back over here, and from here VMSS is what I'm going to search, virtual machine scale set. So let's take that one and create an instance of it, and let's see how to deploy that one. I'm still going to put it under this VM test resource group, virtual machine scale set name VMSS, and same region. Now availability zone is something else we haven't talked about, so we are not going to do anything with that. Let's take again another Windows data center. This is good. Student and my password. Okay, so disk again, you can choose. I'm going to use the managed disk, so that I don't have to manage all of that stuff, but I do want to create a data disk, so all of that is good. And I don't want to do anything with the networking, but this is where we need you can define the load balancing rule. You can place this virtual machine scale set in a backend pool of existing load balancing. So right now I do not have a load balancer, so I'm not just going to choose no. And here you are choosing how do you want to scale, how many machines do you want. So it really doesn't make sense to have only one machine in a virtual machine scale set, right? At least you need to have two for high availability. So we'll stick to the smallest number, 2. And scaling policy, you can have custom, you can have manual policy. If you manual, and I'm just going to use the default policy for now, but if you go to custom, you will have option to minimum number of VM, maximum number of VM, scale out CPU threshold, duration in minutes, and all of that stuff. We'll come back to this one and we'll have a dedicated video to work on this one, but this one I'm just gonna go with the manual scaling policy, so we're not spending too much time here. Management, it's all good. I'm not changing anything. Health, monitor application health, you can enable that one, you can disable. If you have application running, you can probe that application using different protocol and determine the health. Right now I'm not having anything, so I'm just keeping this disabled. I don't need to do anything, so we are here. So, and I just say create, so that should give me a most basic virtual machine skill set, and the deploy, and you know how to deploy a virtual machine skill set using Azure portal. Excuse me. Go back to our slides and let's see what else do we need to cover. Next is skill set we have covered. The other one, ARM templates, and the very last is the Azure disk encryption. So we have seen that we have some disk now where we do not have any encryption, and I told you that we'll come back and do some encryption work on it. So we'll do that, and we'll need a key vault, and we may be able to create that at the time of some stuff that we're gonna do. So let's go here. So this deployment is going on. So before we move too far, the only thing that we didn't cover is the availability option when you can deploy your machines in availability zones. Okay, so that's the third thing that you can do. So think about it in a availability set. Okay, you are still talking about your virtual machines that are part of one data center. Okay, in the one same data center you will have availability within multiple different racks. So if that breaks, if the whole data center is gone, you will still be in trouble. Availability zone solves that problem. So you can have even an availability set deployed in multiple zones, and when you have multiple zones, you can, even a full data center gets destroyed in one zone, you will have another data center that is up and running in different region. So you can do that as well. Alright, so last thing we wanted to do, as I said, is look at disk encryption. So the first thing I'm gonna see, for a long time Azure didn't allow your disk encryption from the Azure portal. Okay, so let's see what we can do about it, if it's still allowed or not. So I know that Win2 that we use our managed disks, so they must not have any encryption available. So let's go there, and if you see both data disk and this, no encryption is available. So let's click on the encryption button, disk to encrypt. Let's do that. Data disk must be mounted by guest operating system. It should be mounted now. Key vault, it's asking select a key vault, so let's see if we can do that. I don't have any key vault, so let's create a key vault here. Just call it, we're going to put it in the same resource group, key vault in encrypt vault 321. Okay, pricing to standard, enable recovery, soft delete, and all that kind of stuff is good. Access policy, I would like to configure all three of them so I can use it for Azure disk encryption, Azure Resource Manager template deployment, and Azure Virtual Machine for deployment. So do that. Go to networking, That's good, that's good. That's all I think I need. So just hit create. So it will create an Azure Key Vault for us, where we can keep our keys and secrets and use them for the disk encryption. So this deployment doesn't take very long at all, maybe like in less than 30 seconds you will have the deployment done, and we'll proceed with the disk encryption at this time. Come on. Okay, while this is going on, let's come back over here to our slides again. I think I have only one more slide for this particular video, and where we have some PowerShell commands we'll go through and perform some disk encryption. Alright, so this vault got created, and now from the disk encryption page we're going to select that one. I don't have any key right now, so I'm going to create a key as well. RSA key is good. Option generate, because I'm not importing anything, generate a name win2 key. Okay, that is what I'm going to call it. If you want, you can set activation date and expiration date. I'm just going to go with the default. Version, you can say whatever version you have in here from the drop down, and just select. Okay, so I have all the information available here. Now let's save this and see. Enabling disk encryption will cause VM to reboot. We want to encrypt and restart, and just say yes. Okay, so what is going on? This is right now Azure disk encryption provides volume encryption for the OS and data disk. So that is going on, and it may take a little bit of time for for this one to happen. So while this happens, just remember Win2 we didn't have any encryption at all. So now we are adding the encryption through the portal, and we will come back and see if we have the encryption available to us or not. Okay. The other thing, we can come back, go to VM test. I'm trying to remember if there are any other virtual machine that I have where I don't have any encryption available. So this one used managed disks. So if I go to the disk, the managed disk had, this is what, Win1. That one had SSE. SSE, but it still does not have the disk encryption. So SSE is where you are actually storing your files in the actual hardware, and Azure is managing all the encryption for you. On the top of it, you can also add disk encryption. So even in here, your disk encryption is not available. So let's work on this one, Win1. So let's I don't need this. So if you want to add disk encryption at the top of, as an additional security feature on top of platform encryption or SSE, storage service encryption, how do you do that? So go back to our slide. So what we'll do, we'll first create couple parameters, variables to store our resource group and stuff, and we'll do it using our PowerShell. So I just clicked on that one, and by the way, the other encryption is going on over here. We'll go back. Okay, we didn't forget this one. We just let this disk encryption going on. When it's done, we'll go and still review it. And this is going on Win2, and right now we are working on Win1. Okay, so just remember what you have for Win1. You only have SSE with PMK, SSE with PMK for both of them, and this is done. Okay, actually, since this is done, let's go to that one and Win1, and let's review that before we start this one, just to remove some confusion. So now disk Win2 didn't have anything, right? So let's see what we have now for the Win2. And if I go to the disk and look at that, so in this one it says the encryption is now enabled. Okay, for the data disk it still didn't do anything. It said although we selected, okay, that encryption, enable encryption, it didn't do anything. And look at the message over here. It says ultra disk are only available when using managed disk. Something that I didn't notice previously, but what it's telling me that if I have a virtual machine that I have created where I told, hey, only use managed disk, or do not use managed disk, even if I try to encrypt it, only this disk, which is the OS disk, is getting encrypted from Azure portal. This disk didn't get encrypted from the Azure portal, although we said, yeah, encrypt everything, right? So with this knowledge, let's go back to our PowerShell again, and we're gonna do some create some variables. So first of all, we're gonna create a resource group is what VM test, right? Is that the right resource group? Overview. Okay, VM test. Okay, that's good. I think that's not case sensitive. Sorry. So let's hit enter. And the next thing we're gonna pick up is the VM name. And we said we're gonna work on VM1 this time. So win1 is gonna be the VM name, and key vault name okay, let's see what is the key vault that we created. Key vaults will get the name of the key vault, and encrypt, come on, copy. So paste and this. So now we got the resource group, VM name and key vault as variable. Next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna create we're gonna get the key vault by running this command right here. Okay, store all the properties in that key vault variable. Then we're gonna create a key. So that's the URI we're gonna store in there. Then resource ID we're gonna store like this, and then we're gonna run a command that is gonna encrypt our machine. So let's do this and put it in here. So what's this doing? Set AZ VM disk encryption extension, and we're gonna do this for this particular resource group for the particular VM, and we're gonna disk encryption. We're gonna use this URI and the key vault ID. Okay, and hit enter. And it's asking enable disk encryption on VM. This command line prepares the VM and enables encryption, which may reboot the machine and take 10 to 15 minutes to finish. Please save your work and all that. Just say yes. Default is Y. So you can say yes or hit enter, doesn't matter. And the disk encryption process should have been started by now. Okay, it will go through, and in a minute or so you will get back what's going on with this command. So let's pause the video just for a second and be back when it's done, and we'll review the status of the virtual machine encryption, and we will conclude the video. Hopefully, so we covered a lot of material. You have good bit of understanding how to deploy virtual machines, how to deploy with managed disk, without managed disk, inside a virtual machine skill set, and perform disk encryption from both the Azure portal and understand the limitations that you have, and also use the PowerShell commands to encrypt your disk. And I'll give you all the commands and everything in the video. Alright, it looks like the script has done successfully. So it's now saying the status code is true. So let's go back to our virtual machine, and for this one we have used win1, and see the status, what we can see at this time. So let's go back to win1, minimize this one, go to our disk, and voila. So you see here it says SSE with PMK and ADE, Azure Disk Encryption. So Azure Disk Encryption is now added as an additional security to this one, and you cannot do this at this time with this with encryption with the portal. It looks like you can only do it using the PowerShell command at this time. Okay, so we go back to Win2. Okay, Win2, we try to do it using the portal. Okay, we went to the disk, and if you look at the disk, this one says it's just a premium SSD and that's all. The other one, we have nothing. So if the attached data disk, they're not getting anything. Okay, this one you can possibly run the command and get it. Let's look at Win3 or Win4, doesn't matter. So Win4, if we go to the disk for this one, we deploy both the OS disk and the additional data disk together. This one again it's with SSC, and if you try to do the encryption over here, disk to encrypt, say OS disk, and again use my exact our existing key vault. So that key, you can use the same key that we have used, use the same version of it, and select, and then say save, and we'll see if it's going to encrypt my disk this time from the portal or not. Okay, so while this is going on, you can come back over here again, and remember this one, it's got only the storage service encryption. It does not have the Azure Disk Encryption. ADE is not available. What you have is SSC. So we'll again review once this is done. Are we successfully adding Azure Disk Encryption to this one or not? And at that time, we will conclude the video. So just kind of to recap what we have done in this video, we have gone over lots of exam topics that you need to know for your AZ 303 or 304 exam. First of all, how to deploy virtual machines, what are the options you have. We didn't really look at the network. We mainly focused on the initial virtual machine configuration and the data disk. Managed versus unmanaged, what are the issues that you may have. The SLA, for SLA with 99.95% SLA uptime, go with the managed disk, and also use the premium SSD. Anything else, you will not have that 99.95% SLA uptime guarantee. With availability zones, you can actually go up to 99.99% SLA. We haven't covered that in this video. We'll do that in another video. But just to remember, if you're deploying one machine, it can have multiple ways that it may get impacted for like unmanaged or your data center failure, unplanned maintenance, stuff like that. So if you want high availability, you at least need 2 different virtual machines. In one data center, you can distribute those virtual machines in different fault domains and different update domains. So if one rack fails, you have another machine that is available in another region. Alright, so in one data center, so availability set is still, it's going to give you options. When if one rack fails, you will have another machine available in another rack, or if the updates are getting deployed, no 2 machines will get the update at the same time. But still, if one data center fails, you are still in trouble. So your availability set will still not gonna be enough. At that time, you have to deploy your virtual machines or different the availability set in multiple different zones, and we'll cover that in a different video. Alright, since this is done, the last thing that we want to do is go back to Win1. That's where we tried to do encryption through the portal, and look at that. Now the ADE also available. So that tells me that now Azure supports the ADE that you can do either from the portal, or you can use the PowerShell script that I'm going to provide with this video to add an additional level of encryption to your VHD files. And this is only for the VHD files, so this disk will not be you will not be able to add the ADE to this particular disk, but for the VHD files you will be able to add this particular encryption. Alright, thank you for watching the video. Hope it's not too long, but and I also hope that you have learned something in this video and useful to you. Good luck with the exam if you're preparing for one. Thank you.